I watched this thing. I can't see its body, but I can see its head, and I can see maybe it's like I would say it's right shoulder as I'm looking at it, and it was behind the door, like
Got
peeking
it.
in, right? I watched it physically close that door behind itself.
You better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It may be the coming of the judgment day. It's a sign, there's no doubt, of the trouble that's about. So I say, my friends, you'd better start to pray.
This is Daniel at UFOdays.net. I'm the curator and writer of the blog. And today I've got my colleague Sheldon with me.
Hello.
And Eli Libson. He's just this guy that I met at UFO Days out there in Elmwood, Wisconsin. And he has a story to tell that I thought is fascinating and we should really get down on audio.
It's Eli Libson. I am from the Twin Cities. I am on today to speak with y'all about some of my experiences that I've been dealing with since I was young. Combine that with some of the experiences that my grandfather had gone through in the late 60s as well.
Sheldon, you haven't heard this story yet. I've already
No,
heard
not
this
at all.
story
I'm very interested.
Yeah, we had a phone call, a phone conversation where we went over this, and I thought, I'd really like to get this more professionally recorded because people aren't going to believe me.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with your grandfather's experience?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go with the start. My grandfather, William Drevis, he was a World War II vet, and he trained self-defense in World War II. An engineer on the Sioux Line train that would go and take iron ore from Superior, Wisconsin, all the way on its trek to Illinois to the great steel refineries where most of the iron that would be produced and used for skyscrapers was taken care of. He had told me the story on a walk one night that at one point during the late 60s, around 68 I believe, he had experienced something that was incredible and unusual, and it was in regards to the classic orange orbs that people have described.
But this was something that he experienced while working on the railroad.
Yeah, he was a brakeman who was in charge of slowing the train down, had made my grandfather, who was the main engineer, aware of that they had seen something off in the horizon and that they should go up on top of the train, that it was something that he needed to see immediately. And so the train was stopped. My grandfather went to the top of the train where a bunch of the crew members were standing atop, and they watched these basketball-shaped orbs move and dart and dance around the train and move in ways that were not possible with the conventions of aircraft at the time.
Okay, so why was the train stopped?
Because they had the brakeman was I think afraid or scared or didn't know what he was seeing in the sky, and was, I think it was just, we got to stop and we need to get on top of this train to get a better viewpoint of what we're seeing. The details weren't, I'm not aware of all of those fine details. I just know that like I said, that my grandfather had mentioned that he had seen UFO, and that this was the story that he recalled, and that he had gone on top of this train and he saw these orange orbs that were moving in ways that are unexplainable.
Okay, and this is 1968.
Yes.
I've actually heard other stories about trains being followed by orbs. I mean, that's just like aircraft are followed by orbs, and it's usually at night. Yeah. It's the train is moving along, and there's some sort of, all of a sudden there's some, usually one of the crew members says, "Hey, what is that? There's something moving with us. There's something moving along with us." And I've heard this story a couple different times, a couple different situations. So this is actually a conventional type of UFO encounter. Doesn't just happen to aircraft.
Yeah. No, I'll once again, that's partially why I'm here, is a lot of these stories, I wish he was still alive to this day to get his the story from his mouth, but unfortunately he passed away maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I'm sure that he could elaborate further on that, but unfortunately I don't have some of those details. And so that's why I'm here today with some of my own story, to get it written and recorded so that it won't be lost. As time goes, everyone knows you kind of forget details, and you miss things. So.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, from a skeptic's point of view, you can just say, well, a story that you heard from your grandfather. Who knows? Who knows what they saw? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just an anecdote, right? But I mean, how did that set you up then for your expectation of strange phenomenon and such? And
well, I'll say this: my grandfather was a storyteller, but it was all the stories that he told. They were always based in reality, and he was extremely. He wouldn't lie to you, and I wouldn't have any sort of suspicion that this was something he would make up. He was extremely honest and pretty straightforward in that sense. And it wasn't anything that he really was open about to just about anybody. It took him many years for him to actually tell that story to me. And I think it was kind of he was with his brother at the time, and he felt comfortable to, I was old enough at the time to handle the story and believe him. From what he saw in World War II and in everything else, there was nothing that he would win from, throwing that story out. And there were other crew members that I'm sure, once again, had that been documented, and and maybe some of them did, I really am unaware, but having them all involved there was enough people there that it wasn't just a one-off thing. And from what I understand, in northwestern Wisconsin, where at this time there was a lot of these similar stories, so there are a lot of things that gel, and that there's too many similarities, and in at least for him, I would consider him a very trustworthy witness to something amazing.
Yep, that's right.
And so that kind of sets me up for kind of what some of the stuff that happened to me also.
Yeah. Okay. Well, remember now, you and I have talked, and you've told me the story already. So I got the whole scoop, and I don't want you to leave anything out just because you've already told me. This is all new to Sheldon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you just imagine that you're telling Sheldon this story, and I'll just be sitting here.
Okay. I'm going to go over probably the three main ones. Really opened my eyes to, okay, this is something that's been happening a long time in my life, but they were kind of these moments of clarity, like, oh, okay, that's what was, that this happened, and now I can look back at the stuff that happened in the past, and I can kind of start to create connections. And so the first moment was, this happened, I think, around 2002, I would say, and it happened around, it always seems to happen around Labor Day. I lived in California at this time. I was with my ex-wife.
Where in California did you live?
We were in Northern California, so we were in the Bay Area.
Okay, Sheldon's from... I just asked because Sheldon's
I'm Central Coast.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We were living in at the time in San Mateo. We had decided that for that time off that we wanted to go to Yosemite. Hiking, we'd gotten into Yosemite. It was our first time. That day, there had been some fires that had come through, as in California is fairly common, wildfires. So there was some smell of smoke. We were hiking around in kind of the below, what was it, Half Dome? Is that the name of the main? Mm-hmm. We had a wonderful day. We had a Chinese pug, a little alien of its own sort, at the time that was with us. We had settled in that there was a campsite that we would stay at that night, and so we'd gone and done our hikes. It was maybe around 4 in the afternoon, and we had decided to start setting our camp up and get everything ready for the night. And that because it was a little smoky that day, we would try to go out the next day and go on some more lengthy hikes with the dog, and hopefully that some of this the smoke from the wildfires would have blown off, and it would have been a little bit nicer day the next day on Sunday.
Eli, did you say how old you were at this time?
I must have been maybe 22 or 23, I think, at the time. So, and I was with my my ex-wife at the time, And so
She wasn't your ex-wife at the time.
she was my wife at the time. I'm sorry. And yeah, so I have to be kind of a little bit careful that I don't get into trouble here. You have to remember I'm trying to recollect stuff from, like 19 years ago.
No, it's good. It's all good.
And so there were all kinds of signs around the campsite that you needed to keep your food hidden or inside of a bear container, and that there were a lot of bear sightings in the area, and that it was just something to be aware of. And as we were setting up our campsite, which was maybe a mile off of the kind of the main highway that went through, there was a lot of bear scat all around the site. And so it was really on my mind that I probably was not going to be sleeping well that night because of the fact that this dog that we had would probably be a tasty little chicken McNugget to a bear. The tent that we had was a 3-person tent, pretty small. And so I'm a Sasquatch style guy where I'm almost 6'4". I'm a big dude, and so the length of my head is on one side of the tent, and my feet are on the other, basically.
Right
so,
on.
yeah. So I'm in this tent. We have our dinner. We kind of settle in. The sun It was pleasant in general, and we settle in for the evening. We make some s'mores or something, of that nature. Go to bed, and I am awoken at 2 a.m. when I hear something shuffling around in the dirt and the brush. And so immediately I am up in protection mode, believing that there is a bear on the site, and it's going to be either going through the remainders of the s'mores or something.
Obviously. Yeah. Anybody who's ever been camping in the North Woods of
Yes.
Minnesota or Wisconsin
Yeah.
knows exactly what you're talking about. It's
Yeah.
that 2 a.m.,
Yeah.
the snuffling around and that
Right.
sort of thing. Yep.
So I'm fully awake, and I'm listening, and I hear it moving around a little bit more, like it's definitely not it's not large. It's now I'm by the sounds I'm parsing that this thing is more like raccoon sized, in my head, right? And I'm listening carefully.
There's no way to tell if it was 2-legged or 4-legged or.
No, I don't have like echolocation or anything like that. I have my eyes open, and I'm kind of looking out. I'm tipping my head back, because it's right on the edge of the tent to see like if I can. There's a little tiny bit of light up there, in the dark. It's not completely pitch black. And I'm trying to see if I can see the silhouette, a form of something, because it kept getting closer and closer. And it's just shuffling, it's kind of moving around, and then it starts to get closer and closer to the tent. And so I'm really kind of on edge, like, what is this thing? Not a bear, but it is like is it going to, is it a possum? Is it a raccoon? Is it going to try to chew through the tent? It gets maybe from what, like I said, no echolocation, but it seems like it's maybe like 2 feet from the tent. And I'm kind of looking back to see the silhouette of something. And then there's this sound. It was a very like mechanical, like a laser beam sound. It felt like my head was being tased. I don't know how to describe it. Like it was like and it was almost like an upload. And my brain, you go to like, is this a seizure or whatever? Like, that's a classic, grand mal thing or something, right? I can only describe like I'm fully aware of everything, but it's just this like, like these images that are going into my head. And I know it sounds crazy. And caveat, talking about this, in terms of judgment or whatever, I have nothing to gain here, and I feel weird even talking about, but this is I'm just describing everything that happened.
It's all cool. It's all cool. Sheldon and I, Sheldon and I, you just got to know that we believe weird stuff.
Yeah.
And so
I think there's mysteries in this world, and like I said, once again, I really I wouldn't believe it, if it unless it had happened to me, and that's why I'm telling the story. Like this is just it. I'm laying it out there, and any kind of judgment you have, it's completely justified.
Okay, so you hear some sort of sound. It's an audible sound, though.
Yeah, it's a very synthetic. It is nothing that I've heard in nature ever. Yeah, it's completely something that sounds like it was made, like it was very like a very electronic sound. And then I'm looking back at this thing because now I'm very well aware of like something major happened. And there are like kind of these really quickly, these flashing lights that I see. And then they disappear. And this upload thing happens. It must have happened in maybe like 2 seconds, 3 seconds.
Let's go into that a little bit and tell me what do you mean by upload?
What I mean is it just felt like something was being put into my brain. I don't know how to describe it other than like a taser or like imagery all of a sudden just kind of like was in my head. And I'll get into that in a little bit here about those images and how they would start to kind of show themselves at strange times as almost while I'm daydreaming, and things that weren't things that I would typically be in my peripheral, that I would be on my mind, where it was I can try to do drawings of it, but it was almost like a gyroscope kind of thing that was, if you think of a hadron collider, and there was a collision that all happened in one spot, that would be a way that with all of these toruses that would converge in one single point, that was where you could rip holes in dimensions. And
kind of like a Stargate.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that you would basically send this matter in all of these different directions that would converge in one vertex. And then that's how something could be in one space in all these dimensions at the same time. And that's not something that I'm not a physics expert. I don't know why but that shit just started showing up.
Okay, so but at that night when you had that 2 seconds within that 2 seconds.
No, it wasn't made aware to me that was this happened. I'll just kind of go through everything that happened. This stuff kind of happened later, where I started seeing these visions of this stuff.
Okay.
This is almost like whatever this creature was, he just couldn't keep his mouth shut. Like he had to share a little bit about who he was and where he came from.
This is all, like I said, I'm purely surmising what I have no idea exactly what it was, but the best way I can describe it, it wasn't like it was taking, it felt like it was giving me information. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, this all happened within seconds. And then I was like, did I just get tased? I was very, very fearful because you have no idea what's happening. So then I'm up and I'm like, I'm not going to go, something is out there. And whatever it is, I thought it was maybe a taser. I hear this soon after that, within seconds, I hear this like a almost like a beacon sound, and I hear them all over the forest, more than one. And as soon as the semis that would come by that road that was a mile away, when they would come through, it would stop, and as soon as they were gone, they would start up again, and I would hear these like sounds moving throughout the forest, this ping ping, like a pinging sound. And my theory was that, or the plan that I hatched at this point, because I'm very fearful of what's going on, that I'm going to stay in my tent, and if something comes in, I'm going to protect my family, but I'm not going to get ripped out of the tent, and I'm going to let it come to me. So I'm like, I'm completely up in my tent, sitting up away from the edge of the tent, ready basically to pounce on whatever tries to come in the tent.
Okay, but at this point you can't be assuming that it's a bear or a raccoon.
No, it's not. It is definitely not a bear or raccoon. Yes, that is
highly
gone.
Evolved one.
I'm thinking this is at this point, you go to all these different places, but at this point I'm thinking this is a human, and that I got tased, and it's a bunch of different guys that are out. I don't know what the hell it is. All I know is, in that fear-stricken process, I am just trying to process it. I'm trying to protect my wife at the time and my dog, and get the hell out of there as soon as I can. So at 4:30, I think, is when the sun started coming up. I unzipped the tent. I woke up my wife and said, we got to get the hell out of here. She's like, what is going on? I don't know what happened last night. And she's like, "You're acting really bizarre." I said, "Something happened. I'll describe it more in depth in the car." And I essentially took that tent apart faster than I've ever taken a tent apart, shoved it in the car, and we got in the car. In the day that we were going to spend hiking that day, we just went directly back home. And that was the end of it. And on the drive home, I kind of alluded to what had happened with at the time. And she was like, okay, I don't know how to process this either. Just like anybody listening to this right now, you're just kind of like parsing it and trying to understand it. And even as I speak to you guys now, I'm still really not completely aware of exactly what happened, but I'm just explaining at this one particular time in Yosemite, that was what had happened, and that's what started this kind of craziness.
How irritated would she be? To be like woken up at 4:30 in the morning, and it's like, what? We're not going hiking?
Yeah.
It's like, oh man.
Yeah. Well, I think at that point it was like, let's get out of here anyways. It was also when you go camping and you sleep on a hard surface, everyone has a romanticized vision of like camping, but when you do it, it's still really not that glamorous.
You're right. You're right about that.
So I was like, all right, we get to go back to our bed. All right, well, whatever. And you seem very worried, so.
Okay, so that's that story.
Yeah. The next year, same time of the year, 2 a.m, I woke up. I was in you move a lot in California just because, hey, we get a better place or the prices are better or it's very expensive to live there. And so I'm at this, living in this apartment. It was called Scotch Hollow. And this was in San Mateo, I believe. We're on the second floor, and 2 a.m, I get this weird feeling like something is in the kind of condo / apartment that we lived in. So I get out of bed, and I just have this very creepy feeling. So I walk around the whole entire apartment, and then we had a kind of a deck that overlooked a valley area, and there were all of these military choppers that were flying over and military grade vehicles.
At 2 a.m.
At 2 a.m.
Well, how can you see? Wouldn't that just be? What are you actually seeing at 2 a.m.?
You're seeing like Apache style helicopters, like buzzing over your place. That's the only way I can describe it as, like, not the standard Huey style helicopter that you would normally see.
Keep in mind, we're talking about California. Yeah. California is a lot more light pollution than you have here in the Midwest.
Yeah, there's a lot of light pollution, yes. Yeah, it's pretty well lit. So it wasn't like, in Yosemite, right, where it's maybe a little bit more dark.
Okay.
The next year, I am living in maybe 2 miles from there in an area called San Carlos, which is just south on the peninsula, heading towards San Jose. And while I'm living there, exactly the same thing. This apartment complex is a little bit different, and I wish I could. I definitely like drawing things out so people can kind of get a picturesque view of the layout of the apartment that I was in. But I get up at 2 a.m. This is the craziest one. And I'm laying in my bed. Behind my bed, there's a giant glass window that kind of looks back at a carport and then up a hill with beautiful magnolia flowers and different things. And in my bedroom, there's a door, and the door overlooks a living room, and it's kind of a C shape if you look from a top view down. Right. And so I'm looking out the door. There's carpet on the floors, and there's a broadband cable that runs underneath the door to the TV that we have in our room. The reason why this is important is the door is left halfway open because we still have this Chinese pug, and it gets up in the middle of the night to get water and food. Normally it sleeps underneath our covers by our feet. And so it's happily sleeping underneath the covers, so it didn't stir. But I wake up and I look at that door where the door is halfway closed, and just below the door handle to the right of the door, there is a gray alien looking at me. And I know this sounds completely insane.
The thing that strikes me right now is that both of these things, these experiences or even all three, happen in the middle of the night, right? And you're woken up. How do you know that you weren't still in sort of like a half dream state or something like that when you were having this experience?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and that is something that definitely was it was in my mind that this is a I've you hear the story that people are still in a sleep state and that this is a hallucinogenic thing.
Well, a hallucination. Or what do you call that?
Waking
sleep
strange
paralysis.
Sleep
paralysis, like
Okay.
the hag experience.
Okay, well, let me get to that. So first, I'm sitting upright, and I will mention this: I'm a very light sleeper, and I'm very protective, and so it's very common. I'm fully awake. I'm in a very, very awake state a lot during the night. It's just in my.
You can't rely on that pug to protect you.
Yeah, exactly. The pug is not doing it. So anyways, I'm upright, and I get this basically, and this is I've never since had this experience. I felt it communicated with me, and it clearly let me know that it was harmless, that it was respectful. It did not want me to chase it. It let me know very clearly: do not get out of bed, do not attack me, do not chase me. I am not going to hurt you. I'm going to back up, and you are going to stay in this bed. And when I do, you can do whatever. It didn't say this, but I'm going to leave.
Okay,
and
wait a second. So when you say it's saying this, you're saying that this is like some sort of
without a spoken word
mental impression that you're getting.
Yes,
or like,
I don't know
does
how
it
to
feel like words that are forming in your mind.
100%. It
Or
felt
just
like it was
fully formed thoughts,
like fully formed, like it was speaking to me. I don't have any way to tell you other than
and just to set the scene, your dog is sleeping
underneath the covers,
and
my wife
is in the bed.
Yes,
and
she's right next. She's sleeping.
She's asleep.
Yep.
And the door is propped
halfway open, propped open
because of this cord that's underneath.
There's a cord and carpet. There is an air conditioner. There's no breeze at all in this room. It is the door itself. There is no way that it just moves. It is a type of door that you physically have to because of the way it's wedged with the broadband cable, which was thick, and the carpet. The door does not move. Okay, it's left halfway open because if the door did close, then with a breeze, then the dog couldn't get the water in the middle of the night, right? So I watched this thing. I can't see its body, but I can see its head, and I can see maybe it's I would say it's right shoulder as I'm looking at it. And
did you see some sort of a hand reach up
no,
for the
because the hand was on the other side of the.
Okay.
Yeah, it was behind the door, peeking in, right? I watched it physically close that door behind itself, and that is where I lost any kind of. You can't explain that when there's physicality in form until you see something that your brain can't wrap your head around, a form of existence that you don't understand. I was at an art fair a couple of years ago, and I haven't had an opportunity to meet these girls, but there are two girls that share one body, and they're conjoined twins. And to this day, I'm like the science that's there. I think that there's some puzzlement in terms of what brain operates what part of the body and how, a shared body can work like that. Mm-hmm. And until you witness that, it becomes this kind of like a matter of fact immediately in that time and space where you're like, this is a thing. A person can share two people can share one body, and until that happens, it was the exact same thing with this. I don't know if it was a robot, a creature. I don't know, other than it was the classic gray. The mouth was barely existent. The nose and nostrils were barely existent. What I recall mostly was the almond-shaped head, the large eyes. I don't recall if it blinked or not. I don't think it did, but I just remember it was about. In terms of where the door handle was, its head was maybe a little bit above the door handle. So it was in that 4-foot range. And so all these things come into play. Just let me just tell the story out, and then,
go on.
So it backs out, it closes the door. As soon as the door closes, then I get this feeling like you can move about, you're free to do whatever you think is needed. Like that telepathy or whatever you want to call it was gone. So I get up, and I am white as a ghost. I'm terrified, but I, in my mind, believe I'm going to find this thing either in my kitchen, in my shower, in a closet space, in a corner somewhere. But there was this human instinct, I don't know what it is, where you're like, this thing is in my place. I just need to know. And I got up and I looked through everything in our apartment. Once I went around and looked through everything, and I came back to the bedroom, and there was nothing to be found, which was
How terrified
strange.
were you to be like? I would be so scared to be like opening the bathroom door or moving the shower curtain or something like this.
It was. Yeah. I was terrified, but I was also in this weird fight or flight, strange protective. I don't know how to describe it. People do weird stuff when they're startled, and I don't always. I go to the flame sometimes. I don't know why. So I'm looking for this thing. I don't find anything. So then I turn around and I go back to the bedroom to tell the story to my wife at the time. And she is upright in the bed, and she looks at me with this strange puzzled look on her face and says, "What the hell is going on?" In this window, the whole room lit up with all of these different colored lights. I've never experienced anything like it. What, are you okay? And she sees me, and I'm white as a ghost.
So what window are we talking about?
In the bedroom, in the bed, there was a gigantic bay window that looked out at the carport and also looked up on the hillside of the magnolia flowers and everything else.
Is this the one above the head of the bed?
Yeah, behind the head of the bed. Yes.
Okay.
I was completely unaware of that whole experience that she went through, and I was like, "You gotta be effing kidding me."
So wait a second now. So you're out looking around the apartment.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, she's now awake.
She's now awake.
What woke her up?
The lights that came through this bay window.
Just like flashes of light, or
yes.
some sort of like light, like not an orb or
no.
Just like some sort of like the police were descending.
She thought it was the police, but she said it was even a much stronger presence than what the police are. All kinds of colored lights, and she described it like a rave that was going on in our
a rave.
Yeah.
Okay, like with the lasers and whatnot.
Like she was like, "What the hell is going on?" And then I told her what happened to me, and it was this bizarre, too many things happening at the same time. So, turn all our lights on. We are up now and terrified, but what do you do? No one's going to believe you. And with all the lights on, we kind of huddle up, I think maybe even in the living room. I don't really remember, but we stay up the whole rest of the night. The next morning, we come downstairs. Just below us, we had friends. We would have generally like a barbecue with them on Sundays. We were walking by to go pick up some meat and vegetables for this barbecue that we were going to have later in the day. The neighbor said, "Guys, what the hell happened at 2 a.m? We said, "What do you mean?" She at the time just had twins, 2 identical twins. They got up at the same time. They were just screaming. "Ah!" So she went out to check on them, and she said, when I went out to check on them, guys, her window sat at about maybe like 3 feet above the ground. Another giant bay window, but on the opposite side, she said that while she was changing her sons, there were children that ran by in the corner of her eye by the window, and she said that it was super bizarre that the neighborhood that we were in, it was fine, but kids didn't run around at 2 a.m, that she saw these kids. All of these things kind of dropped at the exact same time. Maybe I can write off what happened to me, but then this thing happens with my wife, and then this thing happens with our neighbor downstairs, where they have a similar experience with small children running around at 4 a.m. It just
4 a.m. or 2 a.m?
Sorry, 2 a.m. Excuse me, 2 a.m.
And this is, she saw these children running past her window.
Yes.
Or something
outside.
like that. And she says children, but you're surmising that maybe they weren't children, maybe they were these aliens.
She said it was in the corner of her eye, but yeah, when all these things came together, I was like, most likely she saw gray aliens as well, but just in the corner of her eye.
Well, most likely she saw children, but, based on...
Well, okay. I will say the likelihood of seeing children at 2 a.m. where we are, you're more likely to see gray aliens. That's the kind of area we were in. Regardless, if it was children, that is its own oddity.
Now, I have actually had the experience of, and I don't want to have you feel encouraged to be adding any details or anything like, not that you would, but I've had the experience of being in bed, in California, and hearing 20 kids run down the street in the middle of the night because they were TPing a neighbor or something like that. And it's very loud, actually. When you have a large group of teenagers running.
Were these 4 feet tall teenagers? Or?
No.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, did she say anything? Like, did she hear these kids who she described as kids running past? Or
I don't think she heard
silent,
much
or...
over the screaming of her kids, to be honest.
Okay.
They
All
were
And
colicky children.
how old were her children?
Maybe 5 months at the time.
Okay, all right. Just
They were colicky.
Infants.
Yeah, babies. So that was probably the most crazy up close encounter I've had.
That's pretty dramatic. And as far as you described it as a gray. Was that something you were familiar with already? Was that like you said, all of the stuff in our that's a common term in ufology.
Yeah. I don't know what I just know that other people have seen these things. The description it's out there in the vernacular.
It is, but the majority of such descriptions are of these visitors appearing to people in their bedroom. Did you know that? That's
it's pretty common.
How crazy is that? Anyway, go on.
Oh, well, so just to kind of elaborate. So nights after that initial experience, through that same headboard bay window behind us in our bedroom, I would look up at the sky at various times and see what looked like a craft with strange lights that would, emanate from it, that it was up high enough that I couldn't really discern a distinct shape, but it just sat and moved in strange ways where it was like, oh, that must be the craft that they're in. And that was another one that was insane to me, is here we are in one of the more populated places on the planet. How is it that thousands of people just driving by didn't see this thing?
Yeah, this is crazy to me. I mean, this is like, so far I've been with you, but this detail seems to me like, and for the next couple nights I'd look out the window and see a UFO flying in the sky. It's like, what? Yeah. Wait a second. Now, so did your wife see this? Did you?
It would be like I would just kind of get up and I would look. I'd get this weird feeling and I would kind of look up back through this window up into the sky. When these things kind of happen, it makes me start looking up in the sky a lot more than I normally do.
I think if everybody actually paid attention to the sky, we would probably have a lot more reports of these things.
Maybe that's the case.
Yeah.
But so you were a lone witness, or
my wife has seen these. My ex-wife has seen these things as well.
From the bay window
I'm not sure. I can't recall if she had seen that one in particular.
I guess that wraps that up.
Sorry, yeah.
Kind of a strange. It's just kind of like, that's a strange ending detail. To me, it's like, and I would look up and see UFOs.
Back to the main event, though. I'm sure your experience when you're in that fight or flight mode, time kind of dilates for you, right? And you experience it. Yeah. A much shorter period of time seems like a lot longer period of time. But do you have any ability to quantify about how much time?
If I would guess, it would have been maybe a minute or two, just running through all over the apartment looking for this thing. Are you asking when it closed the door and I went looking for it?
Yeah. Like from the time when you woke up and saw this in the doorway, to the point where you've returned to your wife,
maybe a couple
and
of
she
minutes,
had her
probably,
experience.
I would realistically say. It was the communication was pretty quick. I was just watching it. I watched it back up and physically close the door. In terms of beats and this feeling that I got from it, that must have been maybe 10, 15 seconds of just like, hey, I watched it, like, what the fuck is going on? What is this thing doing in my place? All of my reality from that point on was kind of flipped upside down, like. And then when it physically closed the door, then maybe I waited a few seconds and then was like, this thing is in my place. I don't, and I didn't know what to do. I just went into this weird mode of, I'm going to find this thing. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I went out looking for it. And that lasted, you're moving pretty quickly, like you're terrified. So I would guess that was like, it was a pretty small apartment. So I was able to travel pretty quickly through the place and then come around back to where my wife was and get her experience.
Okay.
So the next year, we happened to be in Japan, and we were in an area called Shimoda. It was very rural. Japan, once you get out of the cities, gets very rural very quickly.
Yeah.
And it was a coastal town. And the same time, at about somewhere in that 2 to 3 in the morning period, I woke up, there was a little bit of an earthquake that kind of stuttered things, and then was up, and I had this very bizarre feeling that something had been there. I had noticed that on my hand, there was a circular shape underneath the skin. And
wait, so you just noticed now, like there's an earthquake, you have a strange feeling, you see a circular shape on your skin.
I don't remember if it was that instant or that I became aware of it. I don't exactly recall, but I do remember that on my hand I had this underneath the skin, this circular shape that showed up, and my wife had brought it up and was like, "Is that a tumor?" No, it was on the top of my hand.
Okay.
And she was like, what the hell is that?
Wait, so you're saying that...
about the size of a BB.
Okay, but
underneath the skin.
That is the back of your hand, right? I mean, this is the back of your hand.
Sorry, the back of your hand. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the back of your hand.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the back of my hand.
Yeah.
And we're saying in between, like, where the index finger and the thumb meet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So she notices this thing, and it's bizarre that I hadn't really noticed it. And...
and so she's like, "What? You
what the hell is that?
Tumor?
Yeah, what is it? A tumor? What is that thing?
How large of a circle are we talking about?
Like I said, it was it was like a BB size. So that was very bizarre, and it seemed, and I could feel it under the skin, and you could kind of move it around underneath the skin, and it felt hard like a BB. And so I was like, "What the hell is this? Did I get up? Was I unaware that there was, because sometimes blood gets under and it'll turn into a hardened thing, or
sure.
I was like, is this a piece of sand somehow that got underneath the skin? And I don't know. It was weird, but I hadn't had any damage to my hand, leading up to that. So it was just very bizarre that it showed up. Being a little bit of like a caveman, I kind of was like, let's cut this thing out. And I think she had a for slivers, or she had some kind of tool to kind of cut the skin, and like it was a sliver, and we got this thing out somehow by like just working at it. And I'm not really like super sheepish about like making cuts, since I don't know, I don't have my pain threshold isn't too bad. We cut this thing open. It was just below the skin, so it wasn't a really big deal, and it was this perfectly round freaking BB thing.
What is it, metallic?
It was metallic.
Metallic, perfectly round.
Metallic BB gun.
I mean, if you described to me something that says it was like a BB that was perfectly round and metallic, I would say that's a BB. I would have believed that. The belief would have been, this is a BB underneath my skin.
I would think you would remember if you were shot with a BB in it.
Right.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying.
That's what was the oddity of it.
It
just showed up, and that there's this BB underneath my skin. I apologize. I don't really recall what the hell we did with it. I don't think we even brought it back because we were traveling, and it just was weird. I don't remember.
Oh, that's too bad. I mean, there's actually there are scientists now who are looking at these things, and actually doing like analysis on these things that people are.
I wish I had. I now thinking about it, I wish I did. I will say, after that was kind of the end of any of this stuff. Once again, I'm just completely. I have no idea, but just kind of connecting things. It's like, wait, was this some kind of a tracking thing or something? That just.
Well, you mean the BB was
some
sort
the BB.
Of
I don't know, but soon after that, the communicate, like, And knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen again, but so far I haven't been visited since.
It's like those tags they put on bears, and track them as travel around.
That's generally the thought that's out there in ufology.
Interdimensional scientists.
Right. So what we've described here took place over a period of 3 years then.
Yeah,
There's
more or less.
a 3-year span. And you've not had any of these incidents
Not
then.
since that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank God.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very happy about that. And even to this day, even speaking about this, and it's cliche or whatever, but I don't really like talking about it too much. And I do know there's a lot of there's stigma about it, and in terms of thinking I'm crazy and everything else, but
Well, yeah, I thought you were a normal guy, but now I'm
question it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think you're crazy.
In all honesty, it's very reasonable. And if someone told me the same thing, had I not seen it with my own eyes and had these experiences, and I cannot explain them, and I will even say this, there might be some scientific explanation for this. I still wouldn't rule that out. What I saw, this is how I understand the world and understand what my experience was, and maybe there's another name for it.
We can only put things into frames of reference that are already defined by society and culture and our own experience.
And where science is at right now, and technology and what we understand. I mean,
that's right. I mean, if I always tell people, when I'm teaching, I say, okay, I've used this example with the kids. I'm teaching them about God, and I'm teaching them about creation, and say, okay, you should understand this as well, because you're an artist. And say, okay, now I want you to try to imagine something you've never seen before, and describe it to me. It's like, you cannot do it unless it's part of your frame of reference. All you can do is recombine things that you have already experienced and already seen. It's beyond our human ability until we encounter the new thing.
Sure.
It's absolutely impossible for us. Even the most creative thing we come up with is a recombination of something that we've experienced in some way.
Yeah, it was like a bear with a human body, and
how this kind of all came about was I had gone to Elmwood to the UFO days, and then that's of course how we met. And I had the great opportunity to do the bus tour with Tom. And
Tom Forster, the son of Carol Forster, who was the school teacher who had the incident where when her children were small, she was pursued by a flying saucer. At first they thought it was a star following them. Turned out to be a flying saucer that intercepted them on the road, and there were other witnesses that saw it. All her children in the car saw it. And this became a very famous story that kind of put Elmwood, Wisconsin, one of the stories that put Elmwood, Wisconsin on the map as the UFO capital of the world.
Yeah. And so I had the great opportunity of listening to the story firsthand from Tom, who was 4 years old at the time. He was in the back of the car. And one of the points that really connected with me with this anomaly, and where until you see these things, you can't really wrap your head around it. He said that the craft, that it had lights that ran around the perimeter of the craft, and that the colors were colors that even to this day he has not seen a spectrum that at all capture the colors that he saw. And
so a color that
does not exist in terms of our Pantone or that we have in our arsenal of what we see in house paint or what we see in electronics or.
Well, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
What strikes me about that is that people who have reported near-death experiences, that's one of the things they consistently say is that I saw flowers that were a color that do not exist. I can't describe it because it's not a color that I've ever seen before.
Sure.
It's just there's no description for it.
Sure. Yeah. So
ultraviolet or something.
So there was just a few things on that tour that really really struck home with me. Another one was he had there was a time where they had a visitor, a UFO, a craft that basically came down above the silo. Was it the?
Yeah, it was a grain silo.
Grain
It was on
silo.
a farm outside of Elmwood that I believe he was renting at the time.
Right. They own it now.
Yep.
And apparently it blasted the living room, and the wife came down, and this must have been about 2 a.m.
Blasted with light.
Light, right. And the wife said to Tom, "Hey, what do we do here? This is scary as hell." Tom had to tend to his cows, milk his cows.
Yeah, that's every day for Tom.
Right. 2 hours later. And so, he is like, I need to go back to bed. They're not going to hurt us. We have to go about our daily existence. And that really hit home with me, because the reality is that even telling these stories now, people don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
They won't believe it until they live through these experiences.
Nobody's got time for that.
Yeah, and you and for example with the color thing, until you've seen that color, you can't. That story will not hit home with you at all. You have no sort of way of,
Okay, but
parsing out.
If you don't mind, there's one part that I want to go back to that I'm still not clear on, and that's like, okay, let's go back to this idea of like you receive some sort of download or something like that you're later accessing images of, because as we spoke on the phone about this before, you were describing this as some sort of device, like as if you received the blueprints for some sort of fantastical, phenomenal, scientific, sci-fi type tesseract device or something like that.
Sure.
Exactly. Okay, go ahead.
No, but it showed up as blueprints, and I tried to,
What do you mean it showed up?
Images of this. So the way that my mind works, and maybe this is, I think we had this discussion this morning. I have a very visual setup in terms of I see intact images of things, and
well, you're an artist.
I'm an artist, so it that side of my brain is in terms of if I see a person's face, I never forget it. If I get imagery, it shows up as a lot of times as an intact image that I just kind of build that out as the image shows up in my brain. So what you had said before about people that, I think you said something about that ideas or whatever, they have to see this before.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not the case with me. I'll have stuff just come out of nowhere. It's never been seen before, and I just make it from it's not from existing parts or pieces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see something because then that would be something that I've never seen before.
Oh, okay. The only way I can describe it is it was rings that all converge in one spot. And the reality is that I think I was unable to achieve this project that whatever this being gave to me. But I think it was like, hey, maybe the next guy will figure this out. I don't know.
What kind of rings? What kind of rings?
And I have a thought. I have a thought on this, but I want to wait.
Almost if you imagine like a gyroscope of something like that. There's basically matter that is shot at a central spot, and there's a collision, but the collision happens from below, from every side, from the top, from XYZ, and that it's all the same matter colliding at the same time. Now, how to explain this in physics, this is way out of my pay grade.
I think maybe the prophet Ezekiel described this.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe this is the Merkava that you're seeing.
Well, I'm not the guy to make this thing happen. All I know is like. This
are you
thing,
the guy to draw the sketches as they?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
No, maybe you should do that. They don't have to be technically specific as much as like.
Well, the funny thing is, the other day I was looking, and they're doing something like this in Germany right now, actually, with this. Collider that
the Kern.
No, this is a brand new collider that is creating fission, and it.
Oh well, maybe you're gonna rip open a portal or something.
Yeah, when I was reading about it, I was like, that sounds kind of terrifying, but who knows?
Okay, so these sort of like flash into your mind randomly or something like this.
They did for a while, yes,
but not currently.
Not currently. No.
Okay. All right, that's really interesting. I just want to tell you, basically everything you've told me is stuff I wouldn't believe. I mean, I would say that if you had told me this story maybe 3 days before the day that you did, before we had that phone conversation, I would be like, oh, crazy guy.
Sure.
But by what I would call synchronicity on the one hand. On the other hand, perhaps, the hand of God. I decided to read a book by Preston Dennett while I was on a trip. It was a book about people who claim to have had contact, alien contact. And I just generally don't believe these things. I just generally don't, it's because it's like,
I don't either, to be honest.
Okay. Because it's like, I know like the human mind is incredibly confused and complex piece of equipment that all the time could be misfiring or, and our perceptions and such, we're always trying to make patterns and so forth, and connect things that we don't understand to try to make some sort of reality that's consistent, right? So I just generally wouldn't believe your story, okay? Right off. But I read this book and I'm like, I'll read the book anyway. I read the book because I bought it. And I did, right? When I bought it thinking it was one thing, and I start reading it, it's like, really, it's a bunch of weird contactee stuff. Okay, whatever. But I got the book, so I read the book, and I'm not convinced. First story, I'm not convinced. Second story, I'm not convinced. Third story, I was reading through, but there's like, man, these stories are really consistent. There's a lot of really consistent elements from people. Mm-hmm. And then, by the time I got to the last story I found to be the most persuasive. And it was incredibly, there's all these details, all these elements that then you described to me on this phone call just a couple days later, mm-hmm. were things that I had just read. Mm-hmm. And especially things like receiving some sort of download mm-hmm. of some sort of device that is supposed to be, some sort of fantastical device that's supposed to, do some sort of crazy scientific process or mm-hmm. something like this. Mm-hmm. That's a common experience that sure. people are trying to, they're like, I got this vision of this free energy type of device, that's, mm-hmm. or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
The implant, mm-hmm. There was a crazy thing implanted in my skin, just under my skin or in my nose. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have this experience in the nose, the grays in the middle of the night coming into the bedroom. Mm-hmm. A very common experience.
Sure.
So all of these things that you're describing to me, they have this sort of, even though they're fantastical, they nevertheless fall into this consistent pattern of what people are experiencing, some sort of phenomenon, and it's outside of my scope. It's out, it's above my pay grade to mm-hmm. figure out what's going on here.
I've heard some people liken it to that it's a memory from the birth process, that when you are exiting the womb, that it's the first vision that you see of doctors, and that there's this,
I can't believe that.
That seems strange, but that's
okay. So that's what we're trying to say. Okay, no, your brain is just like,
yeah, that's the, I suppose, probably swamp gas reasoning. Like, right. Okay, like, and like I said, I can't be an anomaly and the only one that it. Clearly, other people are having these same
right.
kinds of things.
Well, and I know that
enough reputable people out there are seeing stuff,
and you have scientists like Gary Nolan from Stanford who now are they've actually looked at some of these samples of, implants and such. Mm-hmm. I believe Gary Nolan is one of the ones who have done this work. I mean, that are submitted to them. It's like, I found this crazy thing embedded in my leg. Mm-hmm. These things show up on X-rays and such.
Sure, yeah.
And they turn out to be conventional objects,
mm-hmm.
like with no explanation for how they got there.
Yeah.
They're not some sort of computer device or some like microchip or something like that or transmitter, but really conventional earthly objects like a BB.
Yeah.
That's
sure.
What is that?
Uh-huh. Yeah, like I said, I in terms of like wet works and different types of technology that can be symbiotic with our bodies and whatever these things are, I do believe that we are at worm status comparatively in terms of our technology and everything else, and that something that can fold time or that can basically travel. I don't know that it can travel the distances, but maybe it can fold time. Something that can do that. I mean, we are so behind and primitive. It's scary. And I'll give you an example. I work in the video game industry, and we're working with these processors for the consoles that can in real time figure out and do the math on how a photon is absorbed by surfaces. That was completely theoretical, and no one believed that was possible. My boss had talked about, like, this is just nutty, insane calculations on the fly that no one thought would be possible. It does that in split seconds now, and it's completely possible. And there'll be times where my wife will walk by and she'll see what's on the monitor just in passing, and she can't differentiate what's, the footage that we're trying to match, and the video game footage looks more real than the footage from the. So
what do you do? What do you do when the simulation is more real than reality?
Exactly, and that is coming very quickly. And the stuff that is happening, where what I'm seeing a lot of is the Dolly stuff and the AI generated art, and the when AI is right, it's just in its infancy. But when that starts to get off and take off, it surpasses what humans can do exponentially, very quickly. And could these beings be that future, right? Could they?
Well, let me just say this: like, if and I don't know where the edge of technology is and spirituality begins. There's this is a really gray area to me. It's like, no pun intended.
Because AI doesn't. It's already at the point where it doesn't want to die, right? So. Does that have a spirit? Is that real? What is that?
And that's a question that's actually come up. Is like, is at what point does sentience become consciousness? And so that's a philosophical question, a theological question, and a technological question that all kind of intersect. So we see that these lines, these sort of like traditional borders, are already we're crossing over them. I am not sure where the edge of the UFO phenomenon and these beings appearing in people's bedrooms and that sort of thing. I mean, that to me sounds very much like demonology, like old school demonology, angelology.
The circles in that would show up in Celtic folklore in the woods, and there were elves. Coincidentally, I had a tremendous fear of elves as a child as well, which is. What kid hates elves and is fearful of elves? And so I believe this is something that has been in my periphery, and
maybe
but whatever, that's its own
yeah all right. So in terms of your religious background, you're Jewish.
Yes.
But you didn't have any sort of like spirituality in that, or I mean, did you?
No, but I can see how people would use religion or some form of spirituality as a way to understand these types of unknowns.
I view everything through that lens. I'm totally like
and that's
the most
completely
religious
normal,
guy.
And you have to figure out a way to parse it and understand it. And I can see how I didn't take that approach with it. I just have a comfort. I like the idea that in this world there are mysteries and that there are things that we can't explain, and I like chaos.
Yeah, I guess I enjoy a good mystery myself.
Yeah.
And, maybe that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you and Sheldon. Sure. Sheldon and I, we enjoy digging into old apocalypses and such. We're looking into first century texts together and that sort of thing to read about people's experiences with the other side and with the beyond and so forth. And so here we've got a little...
it's interesting. Sometimes you see some crossover there.
Yeah. I mean, the burning bush and some of those things, like how could that not be possible? If you spun it in a different way, could that be some kind of fire in the sky? Could that be some light that
Did Moses hear an audible voice speaking to him out of the bush, or was it telepathically?
Yeah.
Was he just
Right.
receiving this message in his
Yeah.
head very clearly? Is
Yeah.
a good question. It's like, so all of these things seem to have some crossover, I guess. But Sheldon, do you have any closing questions for Eli?
What would you say the biggest lasting impact is on you? Maybe negatively or positively. And what do you take away most from these experiences?
That's a tough question, but I would say that for me, these preconceived ideas that we have where we understand the world and that it is this set way, I'm very skeptical. It's made me very, very skeptical of even, and this is a weird one for me because I know that some of these ideas get misconstrued and they get spun in this weird conspiracy theory thing, and that our government is run by lizard people.
I know,
and all
right?
this insanity. And I don't believe in that at all. I don't. But there are things that we can't explain, and that we are discovering things every single day that turn things upside down. I guess what I would take away is we just need to be inquisitive creatures and open to, we don't know everything, and that the universe is gigantic. You are setting yourself up for failure when you start using binary 0 and 1 terms of it is this way and that is the only way it is, and the world is created this in this particular way, and if it's not that way, you don't know what you're talking about. Because through my experiences, and take them however you want, like, once again, my caveat, I'll say this again, until you go through this, listening to myself as an outsider, I would go, I don't believe this guy, and that is 100% fine. I would say the same thing till I went through it. But I would also leave that opening for, like, just because I don't believe it and I haven't had these experiences, I'm not going to say that this person is lying. I just haven't had these experiences, and I need to do more research. I need to experience this myself. Yeah, and I'd also like to say I am going to be speaking more of this through Eli Libson on Instagram.
All right, fantastic.
All right.
Yeah, I myself have never had, any sort of UFO experience. I've always been someone who's been very interested in that and listened to countless hours of Coast to Coast AM and whatever, but never had that kind of experience. I did one time have an apparition kind of experience in the middle of the night, so I can kind of like see where I can kind of sympathize with you on that level. And when I tell that story, people are like, huh?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing, where until it's happened to you and you had those experiences, no one is going to believe you, and that's fine. It just, you're able to live your life and you just carry on, and yeah,
you know what, Eli, I want to thank you for taking the time to tell us your story. I believe you.
Okay.
And I believe that there's a lot of
people.
people.
You don't have to, it's fine.
I believe there's a lot of people listening who will be listening to this who also will believe you, because it's well said, it's a big universe.
Like a comet through the sky, you should realize the price you'll have to pay. You'd better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. It may be the coming of the